Consulting. Let's bring into the conversation Professor Mcebisi Ndletyana. Prof, let me start with you. Today we are going to see the NPA's Asset Forfeiture Unit seizing some of the assets belonging to Edward Sodhi. My interest in all of this, Prof, is what does the governing party have to do at this stage, at a time like this? They are said to have benefited financially. Call it donations. Is that what you want to call it? Should we even call it donations, what has happened here?
I mean, it clearly shows a strong link between some of these business people as well as the ANC. There was a quid pro quo that these business people would be given tenders in exchange for donations. It also sounds like these tenders were simply an excuse to release money from government coffers so that it could make its way back to the ANC. So you certainly, I mean, this is not entirely new. You had a very strong nexus between ANC and business. And for a while now, we have come to accept that business people, in order to get a tender, you need to pay back a certain percentage, the so-called Mr. 10%. So this is pretty much part of it. It's yet another example of the Bosasa instance.
Prof, I am interested in what you have said here, that this was perhaps some kind of arrangement with the ANC. The reason I have problems about this being called donations, you have Edward Sodhi there saying if the ANC, for example, rented a particular venue and they perhaps found difficulty paying monies for that property for those couple of days, he would be called on to try and settle that. If perhaps it was the T-shirts that the ANC needed to print out, Edward Sodhi would be called on. If the ANC had problem paying its volunteers, Edward Sodhi would be called upon. Edward Sodhi and the ANC, how in the world do we even try to understand that as a donor-recipient kind of arrangement? Edward Sodhi paid the ANC on demand.
Well, it's as I say, Xoli, I'm leaning more towards this so-called tender simply being an excuse to release money, money that would then make its way back into the ANC. I mean, it is certainly corruption. That is why, for instance, of those millions and millions of rands, I think 255 million, only 21 million of it was used for actually doing something for service delivery. And of course, you have, as you guys were just discussing earlier, that the value of this tender continues to increase for no apparent reason. And if you were to look closely into that, you would realize that very little of that amount was used towards providing services. So, for lack of a better term, I think this is just an excuse to release money to this so-called business person who would then channel this money back into the ANC. It's certainly corruption. It's not a donation. Donation doesn't quite explain what happened here.
Ziyanda, Ngcobo, you are at the Blackhead Consulting, and that's where the Asset Forfeiture Unit is expected to come through and seize some of the assets there. Talk to us about whether they have arrived there before we talk about these donations that we are in conversation with the Prof.
Well, Xoli, the officials from the National Prosecuting Authority are yet to arrive here at Blackhead Consulting, but I can tell you that it seems as though it's business as usual for the employees and those who usually frequent this particular building and these premises here in Braynston. We've seen people coming in and out, and in fact, we spotted a Bentley GT Coupe, and which is one of those vehicles that's listed on the annexure which is attached to the affidavit that was submitted by the investigating officer in this matter, Xoli. So it's very interesting to have seen that car moving around. We're not quite sure who the man was who was driving that particular vehicle, but we are expecting that some of the vehicles are going to arrive here, and then we are going to then move to one of Sodhi's properties still in Braynston, and it's the one that we know that up until recently, a few days ago, it was put on auction for the value of around 85 million rand. So of course this is a part of the Asset Forfeiture Unit's attempt to try and recoup some of that money, which is believed to be, of course, the proceeds of crime, Xoli. And that contract, Sodhi is said to have received 230 million of the 255 million rand for that asbestos tender.
Yeah. Take us through some of the responses, Ziyanda, that we have heard from senior ANC leaders, people who were Treasurer Generals of the party, the former and the current one. What have been their responses in as far as what Edward Sodhi told the Commission of Inquiries about monies that were released to the ANC?
Well, I'll start off with our Deputy Minister in Intelligence, that's Ziyanda, who was at Luthuli House at the time when he received around 180,000 from Sodhi, allegedly as a friend. And Ziyanda has been quite swift to actually say that they have a long-standing relationship, and that when he received this money, it was at a time when he was still stationed at Luthuli House, and therefore he would not have had any influence over government contracts at the time. So what's money between two friends, Xoli? And then you have former Treasurer General Dr. Xoli Mngambi, who's of course our Health Minister now, releasing a statement last week saying that he's noted that his name has been mentioned at the inquiry, outlining the amounts that were paid in detail, Xoli, how the 6.5 million, how much in the tranches were paid to the ANC, saying that he in no way personally benefited from the money that Sodhi gave over to the ANC, and that the money was used for party purposes. But of course, Xoli, this is linked to what you've been speaking to the Prof about. It's the relationship between political parties and business people and monies that get released from the state. And I can tell you from that particular affidavit submitted by the investigating officer, Ndletyana, he was saying that in particular there was a specific request to have Edward Sodhi be awarded this tender. So part of why he's been charged with fraud and corruption is the fact that other officials within the Free State Human Settlements Department and the National Human Settlements Department actually rubber-stamped the awarding of this tender, despite the fact that this tender was not supposed to be in the Free State. It was initially meant to only be in Gauteng, despite the fact that Sodhi was awarded this tender after the one in Gauteng had actually been completed. So there are so many rules that were broken in the supply chain management process, which is why we've also seen the forensic evidence that Tabani Zulu, who was in the Human Settlements Department as the Director General, and Tumaole Mohlaoli, who was in the Free State Department, both receiving 600,000 and 650,000 rand each. And of course then authorities saying that this is seen to have been a reward and a down payment to ensure that the rest of the tranches of the millions continue to be paid out to Sodhi, who Sodhi then became the distributor of these millions to various other entities, Xoli.
Yeah, quite a mouthful there that you have given us, Ziyanda. And talking about Edward Sodhi, Tumaole, we know that he is a property developer. I think that's what perhaps the business description would be in as far as the business that he does. But who exactly is Edward Sodhi, and how did he become a billionaire? Well, there is some information for you that we have prepared, and let's see whether we can be able to just take you through to who this man is. 47-year-old Gauteng businessman and a self-confessed tenderpreneur. And interesting that we use the word tenderpreneur, because I was in conversation yesterday with Martin Kingston, who belongs to one of the business bodies, and he says that it's important to distinguish between legitimate business people and entrepreneurs. So clearly there is a distinction about who truly is a businessman and who is a fronter, if you will. He is the director of Blackhead Consulting. That's the property where Ziyanda is outside, Absolutely. Which was established in Johannesburg back in 2004. The businessman has 27 employees, which consults in the project management environment and is also connected countrywide. A vast number of properties and cars registered in Sodhi's name and the companies he owns, including Blackhead Consulting. Talking about Blackhead Consulting, yes, there's also diamond trading. Yes. Who did diamond trading belong to, and who was that person a business partner of, and what happened to them?
So Diamond Trading is a partner company of Mpambane, the late Mr. Mpambane, who was a business partner to Edward Sodhi, and he was gunned down in Sandton in very mysterious and acrimonious circumstances. In fact, at the crime scene, when the police arrived, they found bags of money in his luxurious Bentley vehicle, and nothing was taken. So that seemed to be a hit on his life. So his company, Diamond Trading, which was also mentioned before the Zondo Commission of Inquiry into State Capture, was in a joint venture with Blackhead Trading for the asbestos eradication project. And
do we know whether the circumstances that led to his untimely death, whether they have ever been investigated successfully to find out who put a hit on him? Because it was a hit.
It was a hit, Xoli, if you look at what had happened and what the police had said. But in terms of the investigations, they're still ongoing. No arrests have been made. It's still an open case, and the police are saying they're looking into the matter to see exactly what happened. Now, if you look at Diamond Trading's involvement in this particular matter, Mr. Sodhi appeared before the Commission of Inquiry on 2 occasions. In the first occasion, he was explaining about a mysterious list. Now, this list that was before the Commission of Inquiry was supposed to be a list of the particular beneficiaries who were supposed to have been, the beneficiaries of the asbestos removal and replacement project. Yeah. But none of that work had been done, and the list is still a mysterious one. So the payments were done based on the list, and this was about between 200 and 500 houses that were supposed to have been serviced, which never received that particular service delivery.
Prof, let's come back to you. And, some of the work that we've done here at Newsroom Africa, it was to go back to the communities where these projects, or who were the intended beneficiaries of these projects, or these tenders that were awarded to Edwin Sodhi. And the stories you read, both on the press and you see on electronic media, is that of hope at the beginning and despair. How does the party look at the moment in as far as the community of the Free State is concerned?
Let me just answer this first, Xoli, and say these were not genuine companies. These are fronts. I'm not sure if this is the right word, but perhaps meant to facilitate laundering of money. That you create an excuse, as I said earlier, to transfer government money into the so-called company, which is actually a front. You had these Gupta-related companies that did the same thing. But these companies themselves do not provide a service. I think if you were to look at their activities, actually, you would realize that, and I would bet this is what is happening, that they get the money and then contract people who actually provide the service. And they get the bulk of that money. So this is, money laundering. I'm not sure if I am using the right term, but it does look like it.
Yeah.
France intended, and these fronts are linked to the ANC. This is all part of ANC networks, ANC corruption. And so Sodhi does not stand alone in that court. He has to stand with the ANC because this is it's all created by the ANC. This is not a Sodhi creation. It's part of money laundering by the ANC, taking it out of the state, back into the party. Yeah. And so communities, back to your question, communities obviously do not benefit. And this is where then you get to confirm that corruption does have victims, in that monies that should be used towards legitimate service delivery gets used to buy fancy cars and all sorts of things, fake hair and all sorts of things.
It's interesting, Prof, that whilst we talk about this, there are very expensive-looking vehicles entering and coming out of that business property where Edward Sodhi is said to have been doing business from. Ziyanda Ngcobo, I don't know if you can still hear us. If you can hear me, Ziyanda Ngcobo, I suspect Ziyanda Ngcobo can't hear me right now. I think she's just turned her body towards us. Ziyanda, explain to us what just happened there. We saw luxury vehicles either entering or exiting that property. What's going on?
That's right, Xoli, and that's exactly why I had turned my head around, because we've been seeing these luxury vehicles being driven in and out. I mentioned earlier that there was a Porsche that was driven onto this property. Now we've just seen a Lamborghini driving in. So it's not clear whether or not some of these cars are trying to be consolidated here at the business premises for the Asset Forfeiture Unit to take all at one go, or whether or not, these cars are being, because it's not Sodhi who's actually driving these vehicles. There's a particular gentleman that we keep seeing driving up and down in these vehicles, and we're yet to get the officials from the Asset Forfeiture Unit actually arriving here to actually explain to us how they will be conducting their operation today.
All right, Ziyanda, just hold that thought for the moment. Tumaole, we know that today is supposed to be the seizure of some of the assets belonging to Edward Sodhi. Yes. And we were in conversation with the Prof about this strange relationship that he calls money laundering. Yes. He's going to get into trouble because he's not a legal person. Talk to us about how Edward Sodhi explained these monies going to the ANC. Well, he termed them donations, didn't he?
He termed them donations, and apart from donations, he also termed them basically assistance to long-standing friends. When it comes to one particular member of the ANC, high-ranking member of the NEC member, Zizi Kodwa, he said that Zizi Kodwa at one stage called him up saying that he needed some financial assistance, and because he has a close personal relationship with him, he made a transaction directly to him. And he says this was nothing untoward. As someone who has close relations with members of the ruling party, from time to time they would call on him also to assist the ruling party, because as he testified before the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture, the ruling party would have problems keeping the lights on at its headquarters in Johannesburg, Luthuli House.
As they often do. We know that just this past month, in September, they had troubles paying their staff.
Absolutely, Xoli. And so this is where Edward Sodhi tried to place himself as the knight in shining armor, the person who would go to the aid of his colleagues and those he had relationships with in the ruling party. The same ruling party, of course, which had officials in the provincial government, which of course then approved these contracts and bumped them up from the original contract for what it was supposed to have done, and protected him when the work that was supposed to have been done wasn't done. And in fact, the payments, which goes against the PFMA Act, which oversees how these transactions should be done, the payments were done before any work had been done.
Imagine. All right, talking about the ANC and these strange links between so-called business people, there is something that we want to play for you, and it has to do with a former Treasurer General of the ANC. I think we're referring to Dr. Xoli Mngambi here. Let's take a listen.
And the final payment?
That final payment, again, it went directly to the ANC account, and that particular individual there was the Treasurer General of the ANC at the time.
Well, we don't need to, we should be consistent. That is Mr. Mcebisi. You say it was paid to him in his capacity as Treasurer General of the ANC.
It was paid to the ANC, at the time that he was the Treasurer General. And he would have been the one that would have approached me at the time to ask for assistance. And that's why his name is used as a reference.
And that was just about 6.5 million.
Yeah, that's... Yeah.
When we return, we're going to bring into this conversation Corruption Watch, and we're going to speak to its director, David Lewis, and we're going to talk further about these interesting developments today. You're watching Newsfeed AM.